For years my family treated me like trash, and at my sister's dream wedding they humiliated me one last time by handing me scraps while calling me worthless, until the moment I stood up to leave and the groom's eyes went wide with horror as he whispered, "Boss?" And suddenly my mother and sister realized they had made the biggest mistake of their lives in front of every important person they knew. My own mother looked me in the eye, a cruel smile playing on her lips, and called me useless in front of 300 wedding guests. That was the moment my entire world exploded, and there was no turning back. The opulent ballroom, thick with the scent of white roses and expensive perfume, went silent. All those eyes on me, fixed on the plate of cold, sad scraps I held. For 28 years, I had quietly accepted my role. I'm Clara Jenkins, and for almost 3 decades, I lived in the shadow of perfection. My sister, Sophia, was everything our family, especially our mother, Sarah Jenkins, wanted. Beautiful, charming, blessed with that effortless grace that just drew people in. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I was just Clara, the quiet one. The disappointment. Growing up in our sprawling family home in Florida, the differences were stark. Sophia got the master bedroom overlooking the bay. I was relegated to a small room above the gardener's shed. For her 16th birthday, Sophia got a brand new luxury car. I got a lecture about responsibility and a bus pass. Every small achievement I managed was quickly overshadowed by something spectacular Sophia had done. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became my mother's favorite refrain. Sarah, socialite extraordinaire and queen of passive-aggressive comments, never missed an opportunity to highlight my shortcomings. My father, Paul, was too busy building his real estate empire to notice either of us most of the time, but when he did, his pride was entirely reserved for Sophia. This pattern just continued. Through college, Sophia studied fashion design at a prestigious private university, fully funded, naturally. I worked 3 jobs, put myself through state school, studying business and computer science, living off ramen and sheer determination. When Sophia dropped out junior year to pursue modeling, it was celebrated as following her dreams. When I even suggested a semester abroad, I was told it was an unnecessary expense. But I had a secret. While my family saw me as the failure, the awkward daughter who never quite measured up, I was quietly building something extraordinary. It started in my dorm room with a simple idea: what if there was a better way to connect skilled freelancers with clients? What began as a college project grew into something far bigger, something that would change everything. Catalyst Connect was born out of frustration and necessity. I'd watched countless talented people struggle to find work, while businesses desperately searched for skilled freelancers. The existing platforms were clunky, expensive, and just unfair to both sides. I knew I could do better. While Sophia was posting Instagram photos from fashion weeks and charity galas, I was coding 18-hour days, living on coffee and raw determination. My tiny apartment became mission control for what would eventually become one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. I learned everything: programming, marketing, finance, legal structures. Every rejection from investors, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt only fueled my fire. The breakthrough came when a major corporation used Catalyst Connect to find developers for a critical project, saving them millions and weeks of recruitment time. Word spread like wildfire through Austin, Texas. Venture capitalists who had dismissed my emails suddenly started calling. Tech magazines that had never heard of Clara Jenkins were suddenly begging for interviews. But I kept it quiet. Painfully quiet. Every family gathering was a stark reminder of my place in the hierarchy. Sophia would regale everyone with stories of her latest photoshoot or the celebrities she'd met at some exclusive event. She had recently started dating Ethan Hayes, a handsome architect from a good family, and my parents couldn't have been more thrilled. He was everything they wanted in a son-in-law: successful, charming, from the right background. Meanwhile, when asked about my work, I'd simply say I was doing some consulting in tech. It wasn't technically a lie, but it certainly wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that Catalyst Connect was being valued at over $200 million, and I owned 70% of it. The whole truth was that Ethan Hayes' architecture firm was one of our biggest clients, and he reported directly to me through our platform. Ethan had no idea. To him, I was just Sophia's awkward little sister who worked with computers. We'd exchanged maybe 50 words total across 2 years of family gatherings. He was always polite but distant, his attention understandably focused on my radiant sister. The engagement announcement came during Christmas dinner. Naturally, Sophia had orchestrated the entire evening like a Broadway production, complete with champagne, a photographer, and my mother's tears of joy. Ethan had proposed with a ring that probably cost more than most people's cars, and the wedding planning began immediately. "It's going to be the event of the season," Sophia gushed, scrolling through Pinterest boards on her phone while we sat in the family room. 300 guests, the country club, a 10-piece orchestra. Ethan knows everyone who matters in the city. I smiled and nodded appropriately, offering to help where I could. Of course, my offers were politely declined. Sophia had already chosen her maid of honor, her best friend from modeling, her bridesmaids, 6 of her closest friends, and even the flower girl, our cousin's daughter. There wasn't really a place for me in the wedding party, but I would be invited to sit with the family. Naturally. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with dress fittings, venue visits I wasn't included in, and constant updates about details I had no input on. Sophia's world was expanding into something magnificent, while I remained on the periphery, watching. During this time, Catalyst Connect was exploding. We just closed a Series B funding round that valued the company at over $400 million. I was being featured on magazine covers, speaking at conferences, and building a team of over 300 employees. But at family dinners, I still sat at the kids' table, metaphorically speaking. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ethan's firm, Hayes & Associates, had become one of our platform's success stories. They found over 60 freelance architects, designers, and project managers through Catalyst Connect, scaling their business by 300% in 18 months. Ethan himself had praised the platform in industry publications, calling it revolutionary and the future of professional networking. He had no idea he was complimenting his future sister-in-law. The morning of Sophia's wedding dawned perfect and golden, like everything else in her life. The country club was transformed into a fairy tale setting with white roses and crystal everywhere. I arrived early, wearing a simple navy dress I'd bought off the rack, a stark contrast to the designer gowns that would fill the venue later. As family, I was supposed to get ready with the bridal party, but space was limited in the bridal suite. So, I found myself in a small side room doing my own hair and makeup while listening to the laughter and champagne toasts from next door. "Clara," my mother called out around noon, "come help with the seating arrangements. We've had some last-minute changes." The seating chart was a masterpiece of social hierarchy, and I found myself relegated to table 12, far from the family table, squeezed between my great-aunt, who couldn't hear very well, and some distant cousins I'd met twice. Meanwhile, Sophia's influencer friends occupied prime real estate near the head table. "I think there might be a mistake," I said carefully, pointing to my name in the far corner of the chart. My mother barely looked up from her clipboard. "No mistake. We needed room for Ethan's important business associates at the family table." "You understand?" I did understand. I understood perfectly. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I had to admit, Sophia was radiant in her custom gown, and Ethan looked genuinely happy. I watched from my designated spot in the back rows as they exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through everything life would bring. Part of me, the part that still hoped for my family's acceptance, felt a genuine flutter of happiness for them. But that feeling was short-lived. The reception was in full swing when the dinner service began. Table after table was called up to the elaborate buffet, starting with the head table and working through the social hierarchy. The family table went second, the important business associates third, and so on. Table 12 was called last. By the time I reached the buffet, the elegant spread had been picked over pretty thoroughly. The perfectly arranged salmon was mostly gone, replaced by scattered remnants. The roasted vegetables were sparse, and the signature pasta dish was down to the final scraping. I took what I could find, arranging the remnants on my plate with as much dignity as I could muster. As I walked back to my table, balancing my plate of leftovers, I passed the head table where my family was dining on perfectly prepared portions and laughing at some story Sophia was telling. "Clara," my mother's voice cut through the laughter, stopping me in my tracks. The conversation at nearby tables quieted as people turned to look. "I see you found something to eat." Her tone was light, conversational, but I knew that tone. It was the one she used when she was about to deliver a perfectly aimed blow. "Yes," I replied simply, not trusting myself to say more. "Well," she continued, her smile sharp as crystal, "I suppose a useless child deserves leftovers." The words hit like a physical blow. Around us, conversation stopped entirely. A few people gasped softly. Sophia looked momentarily uncomfortable, but then she smirked, that small, superior smile I'd known my entire life. "Pathetic," she whispered, just loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. For 28 years, I had endured comments like this. 28 years of being diminished, dismissed, and degraded. 28 years of smiling and taking it, of being the bigger person, of hoping that someday I would be enough for them to love. But sitting there, holding a plate of actual scraps while 300 people stared at me with mixtures of pity and secondhand embarrassment, something inside me finally broke. Not in a dramatic, explosive way, but quietly, like the last thread holding up a picture frame finally giving way. I smiled, the same smile I'd worn through decades of humiliation. I stood up slowly, carefully setting my napkin on the table. "You know what?" I said quietly, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. "You're absolutely right." And I turned to leave. I'd made it perhaps 10 steps toward the exit when I heard Ethan's voice behind me, sharp with shock and something that sounded like panic. "Boss! Boss, what are you doing here?" The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. I stopped walking, my back still to the head table, and closed my eyes for just a moment. When I opened them and turned around, the entire reception had fallen into the kind of silence that feels loud. Ethan was staring at me, his face a mixture of recognition and dawning horror. He had gone completely pale, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. "Boss!" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. "What did you just call my sister?" The 300 guests seemed to lean forward, collectively, sensing drama, but not yet understanding its magnitude. My mother's face had gone through several color changes, settling on a sickly gray-green. My father, for the first time in years, was giving me his complete attention. I looked at Ethan, really looked at him, this man who was about to become my brother-in-law, who had been dating my sister for 2 years, who had never bothered to learn what I actually did for a living. "Hello, Ethan," I said calmly. "I think we need to talk." Your seat, Jenkins," he stammered, using the initials I went by professionally. "You're the founder of Catalyst Connect." "I am, but you're Sophia's sister. You work with computers." "I do work with computers," I said, among other things. The murmurs started at the tables closest to us and rippled outward like a wave. People were pulling out phones, undoubtedly Googling my name. Within moments, the whispers began. "Catalyst, that's the company that was just valued at. She's on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Didn't she just speak at that tech conference in Seattle?" Sophia was staring at me like I was a stranger. "Clara, what is going on?" I walked back toward the head table, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Every step felt surreal, like I was walking through someone else's life. When I reached Ethan, he actually stood up. The gesture so automatic it was clearly professional habit. "Ms. Jenkins," he said formally. And the use of my last name, our last name, sent another ripple of shock through the crowd. I had no idea. I mean, I never realized that your fiancé's sister was your biggest client. I finished for him. Yes, I gathered that. What happened next was perhaps the most surreal 10 minutes of my life. Standing there in my simple navy dress, surrounded by 300 people in wedding finery, I found myself giving an impromptu explanation of the professional relationship that Ethan, and Sophia, and the rest of my family had never bothered to learn about. Catalyst Connect has been working with Hayes & Associates for 18 months, I said, addressing the crowd as much as my family. Ethan, you've personally used our platform to find what, 63 freelancers? Including the entire design team for the Riverbend Complex project. Ethan nodded mutely, still looking like he'd seen a ghost. In fact, I continued, pulling out my phone, I have your email from last Tuesday right here. You were thanking our platform for helping you land the Grandview Hotel contract. You called our service absolutely essential to your company's success. I looked up at Sophia, who was gripping her champagne glass so tightly I was worried it might shatter. Your fiancé's architecture firm has paid my company over $400,000 in fees over the past year and a half. We've been directly responsible for at least 60% of his business growth. The silence was deafening. Someone's phone buzzed. A server dropped a spoon somewhere in the back of the room, and it clattered like thunder. My mother found her voice first, though it came out as barely more than a croak. Clara, is this some kind of joke? I almost laughed. After 28 years, she thought this was a joke. No, Mom, it's not a joke. Catalyst Connect is currently valued at $437 million. I own 70% of it. I have 312 employees across 6 offices. Last month, I was invited to speak at the World Economic Forum about the future of work. I paused, looking around at the sea of faces staring back at me. But apparently, none of that matters as much as the fact that I got to the buffet table last. What followed was chaos of the most refined sort. The kind of chaos that happens when wealthy people realize they've made a catastrophic social error in front of witnesses. My mother immediately went into damage control mode, her voice taking on that bright, fake tone she used when she was trying to smooth over social disasters. Well, of course, we knew Clara was doing well with her little computer business. She laughed, the sound sharp and desperate. We're so proud of our daughters, both of them. Clara, darling, come sit with the family. We can make room. But it was too late for that. Way too late. Ethan was still staring at me like I might disappear if he blinked. Ms. Jenkins. Clara, I need to apologize. I had no idea that you were, if I had known what? I asked quietly. If you had known what? That I was successful? That I was important? Would that have changed how you treated me? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. Sophia finally found her voice, and when she did, it was shrill with panic and something that might have been embarrassment. Clara, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you say anything? It was such a perfect question, so perfectly revealing of everything that was wrong with my family dynamics. I looked at her, really looked at her in her perfect dress, with her perfect hair, surrounded by her perfect wedding. When? I asked simply. When would I have told you? During the family dinners where you talked for hours about your modeling shoots while everyone listened with rapt attention? During the holidays where every conversation was about your achievements, your boyfriend, your plans? When exactly was I supposed to interrupt the Sophia show to mention my little computer business? The truth hung in the air like smoke around us. 300 guests watched the Jenkins family implode in real time. That's not fair, Sophia protested. But her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I turned to address the whole family now. My parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles who had watched this dynamic play out for decades. When was the last time any of you asked me about my work? Really asked, not just how are things going before immediately changing the subject. Silence. When was the last time you asked about my life, my dreams, my goals? When was the last time any of you treated me like I mattered? More silence. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet through all of this, finally spoke up. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the calculation behind it. "Clara, we had no idea you were. We didn't realize the scope of your success. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." Of course. Now that they knew I was worth something, now they wanted to discuss it privately. Now they wanted to manage the situation. But I was done being managed. Standing there in the center of that reception hall, surrounded by crystalline flowers and the wreckage of my family's assumptions, I realized I had a choice to make. For 28 years, I had chosen to stay. I had chosen to endure. I had chosen to hope that someday, somehow, I would be enough for them. But I wasn't the same person who had walked in here with a plate of scraps. That person was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood her own worth. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "I spent my whole life trying to earn your love and respect. I thought if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, became successful enough, you would finally see me." I looked at each of them in turn. My mother with her social climbing and cruel words. My father with his selective attention. Sophia with her thoughtless cruelty. But the truth is, you never saw me at all. You saw what you expected to see, the failure, the disappointment, the useless child. And even now, even knowing what I've accomplished, you're not proud of me. You're just embarrassed that you got it wrong in front of all these people. My mother started to protest, but I held up a hand. "Don't. Please don't make it worse with lies." I turned back to Ethan, who was still standing there looking shell-shocked. "Congratulations on your wedding, Ethan. I hope you and Sophia will be very happy together. Just so you know, Hayes & Associates has been one of our most valued clients. I'll make sure the transition team handles your account personally going forward." "Transition team?" he asked weakly. "I won't be your primary contact anymore. Conflict of interest, you understand?" I started walking toward the exit again, and this time, no one tried to stop me. But as I reached the edge of the dance floor, I heard Sophia's voice, smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. "Clara, wait." I stopped but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time, she sounded like she meant it. "I'm really, really sorry." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of all those years, all those small cruelties and casual dismissals. Part of me wanted to turn around, to accept the apology, to try one more time. But I was tired. So incredibly tired of being the one who forgave, who understood, who made excuses for their behavior. "I know you are," I said without turning around. "But sorry doesn't undo 28 years, Sophia. Sorry doesn't make me forget what you all really think of me." And with that, I walked out of my sister's perfect wedding and into the rest of my life. The evening air was cool against my face as I stepped outside the country club. The parking lot was filled with luxury cars, and valets were scurrying around, managing the overflow from the reception. I stood there for a moment, breathing deeply and trying to process what had just happened. "Excuse me, are you Clara Jenkins?" I turned to find a man approaching from the valet stand. He was tall with dark hair and kind eyes, wearing a navy suit that looked expensive but not flashy. There was something familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. "Yes," I said cautiously. After what had just happened inside, I wasn't sure I was ready for another confrontation. "I'm Daniel Lee," he said, extending his hand with a warm smile. I was inside for the reception. "I'm a friend of, well, I was supposed to be a friend of the groom, but after what I just witnessed, I'm not sure how I feel about that." I shook his hand, still trying to place him. "Do we know each other?" "We've corresponded by email quite a bit, actually. I run Lee Digital Marketing. We've been using Catalyst Connect for about 8 months now." Recognition dawned. Daniel Lee. We'd exchanged dozens of emails about his company's expansion, their need for graphic designers and social media specialists. He'd been one of our most enthusiastic clients. "Of course, I'm sorry I didn't recognize you," I managed a small smile. "Though, I have to say this isn't exactly how I imagined we'd meet in person." "No, I imagine not." His expression was serious. "Now, I have to tell you, what I just saw in there was absolutely appalling. The way your family treated you, you don't have to." "No, I do have to," he interrupted gently. "I've been following your work for over a year now. Catalyst Connect has revolutionized how small businesses find talent. You've created something incredible. And the fact that your own family couldn't see that," he shook his head, genuinely angry on my behalf. "How do you know, Ethan?" I asked, curious despite everything. "College roommates," he said with a grimace. "Though, honestly, after tonight, I'm questioning a lot of things about him. I mean, how do you date someone for 2 years and not know what their sister does for a living? How do you use a service professionally and not realize the founder is sitting at your family dinners?" It was a good question, one I'd been asking myself for months. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel continued. "Why didn't you ever say anything? I mean, you could have mentioned it at any point." I considered the question, the same one Sophia had asked inside. "Would you believe me if I told you I tried?" "Not directly, but I tried to share my successes with them. Every time I started to talk about work, about Catalyst Connect, about what we were building, their eyes would glaze over. They'd change the subject or make some comment about me playing with computers, or just start talking about Sophia's latest photoshoot." I looked back at the country club where the reception was undoubtedly continuing despite the drama. After a while, I stopped trying. It became easier to just let them think what they wanted to think. And honestly, there was a part of me that wanted to see how long it would take for them to figure it out on their own. How long it would take for them to ask a single meaningful question about my life. How long did it take? 2 years. And they only found out by accident. Daniel was quiet for a moment, processing this. That must have been incredibly lonely. The simple observation, delivered with such genuine empathy, nearly undid me. Of all the things people might have said about what had just happened, he'd identified the core of it. It had been lonely. Devastatingly, crushingly lonely. It was, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Listen," Daniel said after a moment. "I know this is probably the last thing you want to think about right now, but I'm supposed to be staying at a hotel about 10 minutes from here. There's a nice bar in the lobby, very quiet. Would you like to get a drink and decompress from all this?" I almost said no. It had been the most emotionally exhausting day of my life, and the smart thing would have been to go home, order takeout, and try to process everything that had happened. But looking at Daniel, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes, I realized I didn't want to be alone. "Not tonight." "Actually," I said, "that sounds perfect." The hotel bar was everything he'd promised, quiet, dimly lit, with comfortable leather chairs and a bartender who seemed to understand the value of discretion. We found a corner table away from the few other patrons, and Daniel ordered a scotch while I opted for wine. "So," he said once our drinks arrived, "I have to admit, I'm curious about something. Catalyst Connect is incredibly successful. You're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Why were you even at that wedding? Why subject yourself to that kind of treatment?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself for months leading up to Sophia's wedding. "Family is complicated," I said finally. "No matter how successful you become, no matter how much you achieve, there's still this part of you that wants the people who raised you to be proud of you, to love you. Even when they treat you like garbage. Especially then." I took a sip of wine, considering how to explain something I wasn't sure I understood myself. I kept thinking that if I just proved myself enough, if I just achieved enough, they would see me differently, that one day I would wake up and be the daughter they wanted instead of the disappointment I'd always been. But they never saw your achievements. No. And the crazy part is, I made it easy for them not to see. I didn't put my name on press releases. I used my initials professionally. I kept a low profile. Part of it was strategic. I didn't want the attention. But part of it was, I don't know, shame, maybe. Daniel leaned forward, his expression intense. Shame about wanting their approval so badly, about still caring what they thought when it was obvious they didn't care about me. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of the day settling around us. Finally, Daniel spoke again. Can I tell you something? I've been running my company for 5 years now. I've worked with hundreds of platforms and service providers. But Catalyst Connect is different. It's not just about the technology, though that's impressive enough. It's about the philosophy behind it. What do you mean? You built something that empowers people. Freelancers who were struggling to find work, small businesses that couldn't afford big recruitment agencies. You created opportunities for people who were overlooked by traditional systems. He paused, studying my face. Maybe that's because you knew what it felt like to be overlooked. The observation hit me like a physical blow. I had never made that connection before, but he was absolutely right. Every feature we'd built into Catalyst Connect, every policy we'd implemented, every decision we'd made had been informed by my own experiences of being underestimated and dismissed. I never thought about it that way, I admitted. Well, maybe you should. Because what happened tonight, that wasn't about you not being good enough. That was about them being too small-minded to recognize greatness when it was sitting right in front of them. We talked until nearly midnight, our conversation ranging from business philosophy to family dynamics to the strange turns life can take. Daniel was easy to talk to, with the kind of sharp intelligence that I'd learned to appreciate in the business world, but had never expected to find in someone connected to my family's social circle. I have to ask, I said as we were finishing our second round of drinks. How did you end up friends with Ethan? You seem different. Daniel laughed, a self-deprecating sound. College roommate situation, you know how it is. You get thrown together as 18-year-olds and somehow maintain the connection even when you grow in different directions. Though, I have to say, watching him tonight made me realize just how different our directions have been. What do you mean? Ethan is a good architect, I'll give him that. But he's always been focused on status, on appearances, on being part of the right crowd. Tonight, watching him panic when he realized you were successful, watching him immediately shift into damage control mode, it was pretty revealing. He was protecting Sophia, I said, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Was he? Or was he protecting himself? Think about it. He's been building his business using your platform for over a year. His success is directly tied to your company, and he never bothered to learn that the founder was going to be his sister-in-law. What does that say about him as a person? It was a harsh assessment, but not an unfair one. Ethan had been happy to benefit from Catalyst Connect services while treating its founder like an irrelevant afterthought at family gatherings. You know what the really crazy part is? I said, swirling the wine in my glass. I actually liked him. Before tonight, I thought he was good for Sophia. He seemed to genuinely care about her, and she was happy. Maybe he does care about her. But caring about someone doesn't excuse willful ignorance about their family. And it certainly doesn't excuse standing by while your future mother-in-law humiliates your future sister-in-law in front of 300 people. The truth of that statement settled over me. Ethan hadn't just failed to recognize my professional success. He'd failed to stand up for me as a person. Even if he'd thought I was just Sophia's sister who works with computers, I was still going to be family. The way I'd been treated tonight should have bothered him on a basic human level. I think, I said slowly, I've been making excuses for all of them for a very long time. Probably because you're a fundamentally decent person who assumes other people are too, Daniel observed. It's actually one of the things that comes through in your business philosophy. Catalyst Connect succeeds because it assumes the best in people. That freelancers want to do good work, that businesses want to treat people fairly. and sometimes that assumption is wrong. Sometimes. But that doesn't mean you should stop making it. It just means you should be more selective about who deserves the benefit of the doubt. As Daniel walked me to my car, a modest sedan that probably cost less than Sophia's shoes, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sophia's name, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Answer it, Daniel encouraged. You'll always wonder what she wanted to say. I accepted the call and put it on speaker. Clara. Sophia's voice was small, shaky. Clara, please don't hang up. I'm here. God, I don't even know where to start. The reception is basically over. Half the guests left after you did. Mom is locked in the bathroom crying. Dad is furious. And Ethan? She trailed off. What about Ethan? He's been pacing around, asking everyone if they knew. If they knew about Catalyst Connect, about how successful you are. He keeps saying he feels like an idiot, that he should have known. He should have known, I said simply. And you all should have. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I hate that. I hate that it took tonight for me to realize how terribly we've treated you. I could hear the genuine emotion in her voice. But I'd heard Sophia cry before. She was very good at it, very convincing. The question was whether this time was different. Sophia, no. Please let me finish. I need to say this. She took a shaky breath. I was jealous of you. That stopped me short. Jealous of me? You were always so smart, so focused. Even when we were kids, you had this inner strength. You never needed anyone's approval to know who you were. And I guess I resented that because I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone else wanted me to be. Daniel was watching me intently, and I could see the skepticism in his eyes. But something in Sophia's voice made me listen. When you started talking about your work, about technology and business, I didn't understand it. It made me feel stupid. So, I just dismissed it, made it seem less important than what I was doing. And Mom and Dad went along with it because my stuff was easier to understand, easier to brag about to their friends. Clara, I know this doesn't excuse anything. I know sorry isn't enough, but I need you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you, and I'm ashamed of myself. There was a long pause. When Sophia spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Are you ever going to forgive us? It was the question I'd been dreading because I didn't have an answer. The hurt was too fresh, too deep. The pattern of dismissal and disrespect had gone on for too long. I don't know, I said. Honestly, I really don't know. After I hung up with Sophia, Daniel and I stood in the parking lot for a moment, processing the call. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking that this is the most honest conversation I've ever had with my sister. And I'm also thinking that it might be too little, too late. Maybe. But at least now she sees it. That's something. Is it, though? Daniel asked softly. Is recognition without change actually worth anything? What would you have done in my shoes?